If you grew up in America in the 80s, you might remember something like this. The word divorce isn't whispered anymore. It's said plainly, like a weather report. Adults talk about it in the kitchen when they think you can't hear. Or they talk about it right in front of you, using calm voices that don't match the heaviness in the room. Your backpack is by the door because you're switching houses again. A duffel bag sits half-packed because you learned not to fully unpack. Someone says, "It's for the best," and you nod, even though you don't know what best is supposed to feel like. And what you remember most isn't always the big moment. It's the small ones. 2 toothbrushes, 2 sets of rules, 2 different versions of the same parent. The way you become an expert at reading tone because tone tells you whether today is a good day or a day you should disappear into your room. If you grew up during the divorce era in 1980s America, you probably didn't describe it as trauma at the time. Most kids didn't have that language. You described it as normal, as just what happens, as something you handle. But here's the truth that's easy to miss. It wasn't just a family change. It was a psychological environment that trained a generation's nervous systems to become adaptable, guarded, and quietly hyper-aware. Divorce existed before the 1980s, but the social reality around it shifted dramatically in the decades leading into and through the 80s. By then, many communities had normalized it in practice, even when it still carried stigma in conversation. And that created a strange combination. More families were restructuring, more kids were living between homes, but emotional language, especially for children, was still limited. Therapy wasn't as mainstream for kids. Schools didn't always have strong support systems. Many parents were doing their best while also navigating their own grief, anger, guilt, or financial strain. And the cultural tone of the era still leaned heavily toward toughness and self-reliance. So, children often learned divorce the way they learned everything else. By watching, by guessing, by adapting quietly. They didn't always get explanations that matched what they felt. They got fragments. "It's not your fault. We still love you. Stop worrying. Be strong. You'll be fine." And sometimes those words were true. Sometimes they were used to skip discomfort. Either way, the child still had to live inside the new structure. 2 households, 2 calendars, 2 sets of expectations, 1 nervous system trying to keep up. This is the foundation of divorce-era psychology. Childhood becomes a practice in switching realities. And switching realities builds flexibility, but it also builds vigilance. One of the quiet experiences many divorce-era kids remember is movement, not dramatic. Movement, routine movement, weekend switches, holiday negotiations, summer rotations, the "whose house are we at?" math. The feeling of being half here, half there, never fully settled. And what that does to a child is subtle, because children don't just attach to people. They attach to places. A home isn't only a building. It's sensory stability, where the towels are, which cabinet has the cereal, how loud the TV is, whether you're allowed to leave shoes by the door, whether you get hugged when you're upset or told to calm down. When you have 2 homes, you learn 2 environments. You learn 2 emotional climates, and you become a translator of yourself. At mom's house, you might be the helpful kid. At dad's house, you might be the easy kid. In one place, you speak softly. In the other, you speak tough. In one place, feelings are allowed. In the other, feelings are inconvenient. That skill shifting looks like maturity from the outside. But inside, it can create a kind of split belonging. You're always adjusting, always calibrating, always checking the air before you fully exhale. And even when both parents love you, The switching itself teaches a lesson. Love can exist in separate worlds, and you have to travel between them. That travel builds resilience. It can also build a quiet loneliness, the feeling that no single place holds all of you at once. Another common divorce-era pattern isn't the legal separation. It's the emotional triangle. A child becomes the messenger. The child becomes the translator. The child becomes the buffer. Tell your dad. Ask your mom. Did she say anything? Is he seeing someone? Just don't mention that at my house. Even when parents tried not to involve kids, children still absorb tension because kids are emotional detectives. They read tone. They read silence. They read door slams and pauses and the way adults say it's fine when it isn't. So many divorce-era kids became experts at reading rooms. They learned to predict conflict before it happened. They learned to avoid certain topics. They learned which parent was fragile that week. They learned how to keep things smooth, and the nervous system learned something powerful from that. My job is to manage the emotional temperature, not because anyone said it directly, because the child could feel that things went better when they were easy. So they became easy, and easy becomes identity. If you grew up in the ADS with divorced or separating parents, what was the thing you learned to do? Automatically pack early, keep secrets, read moods, stay quiet, keep everyone calm. Drop one short detail in the comments, not a full story, if you don't want to just the pattern. One pattern can explain an entire childhood, because once you name the room reading, you can see the deeper lesson divorce taught many kids. Stability isn't assumed. It's managed. A lot of divorce-era kids adopted the same survival strategy. Don't add weight. If a parent is stressed, don't complain. If money is tight, don't ask for extras. If adults are arguing, don't make noise. If everyone is overwhelmed, be the kid who's fine. This doesn't mean the child doesn't have needs. It means the child learns to hide them, and hidden needs don't disappear. They go underground. They show up later as guilt for needing comfort, discomfort receiving help, confusion about what you actually want, a habit of minimizing your own feelings, feeling responsible for other people's moods. Because the nervous system learned early, being low maintenance keeps you safe. The child becomes the good kid, the one who doesn't cause trouble, the one who gets praised for being mature, the one who handles it. But inside, the good kid strategy is often a trade. You get peace in the room. You lose space for your own emotions. And when you repeat that trade for years, you don't just behave that way in childhood. You become that way. You become the adult who says, "I'm fine," even when you're not. You become the adult who feels uncomfortable being cared for. You become the adult who only relaxes when everyone else is okay. Not because you're broken, because your nervous system learned a job too early. Divorce-era childhood often included another layer: new people. A parent starts dating. A new partner appears, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, sometimes with kindness, sometimes with friction. And for a child, a new partner doesn't land as adult romance. It lands as a question: where do I fit now? Because a child's nervous system tracks attention like oxygen. If your parent's attention is divided, your body feels it, even if no one intends harm. This is where many kids developed a deep sensitivity to replacement. Not always consciously, often as a quiet background fear. If my parent loves someone else, do they love me less? If I don't behave, will I be pushed aside? If I'm inconvenient, will I be chosen last? So the child becomes even more strategic. They try to be likable. They try not to cause trouble. They try to keep their place. Even in healthy, blended families, the adjustment is real. The child is navigating loyalty, attachment, and change all at once. And when change keeps happening, the nervous system learns to stay slightly braced, because bracing feels safer than hoping. One of the most lasting psychological effects of divorce-era childhood is compartmentalization. Kids learn to keep things separate. You don't talk about mom's house at dad's house. You don't talk about dad's house at mom's house. You don't bring one world into the other. Sometimes this was demanded. Sometimes it was unspoken. Either way, the child learns, my life must be divided. And division teaches a nervous system how to compartmentalize emotions. You can be sad in one place and act cheerful in another. You can feel angry and hide it because it would make things worse. You can love both parents and still feel like loving both is a betrayal. This is where many kids became emotionally skilled in a way that's hard to see. They could read people. They could adapt quickly. They could shift tone. They could keep secrets. But there's a cost to being good at compartmentalization. You can become unsure of your own emotional truth. Because when you spend years adjusting your feelings to fit the room, you may stop trusting what you feel naturally. You start asking, what am I allowed to feel here? Instead of, what do I feel? This is why divorce-era kids can grow into adults who are very competent but emotionally cautious. They learned love inside complicated architecture, and complicated architecture leaves patterns. Here's the twist that makes this story more precise. For many children, the most damaging part wasn't the fact that parents separated. It was the uncertainty around it. Not knowing what would happen next. Not knowing where you'd live. Not knowing whether adults would stay calm. Not knowing whether you were allowed to ask questions. Not knowing whether your feelings were a burden. Divorce can be handled with stability. It can be handled with clarity. It can be handled with care. But when divorce is handled with chaos, secrecy, unpredictability, or emotional inconsistency, the child's nervous system learns a core belief. The ground can shift at any time, and that belief becomes an adult pattern. You might struggle to fully relax in relationships, even good ones. You might scan for signs of abandonment. You might feel safest when you're independent. You might prefer to keep parts of yourself private, just in case. That isn't cynicism. That's a nervous system that learned to prepare. Because when childhood teaches you that stability is temporary, you grow up becoming your own stability, sometimes at the cost of intimacy. So the psychology of divorce-era childhood in 1980s America isn't one simple story. It's a pattern of nervous system training. Children learned to switch environments quickly, read rooms and anticipate tension, minimize needs to protect adults, manage loyalty between two worlds, compartmentalize emotions, stay functional in the middle of uncertainty. Those skills are life, real. They helped kids survive. Many became strong, resourceful, and emotionally perceptive adults. But skills gained through survival come with shadows. Adaptation can become hypervigilance. Independence can become isolation. Being easy can become self-erasure. Compartmentalization can become disconnection from your own needs. And none of this means your parents didn't love you. Love can exist alongside stress, limited tools, and human imperfection. Many parents were doing their best with what they knew, in a cultural era that didn't always support emotional nuance. This isn't about blame, it's about naming. Because when you name the pattern, you stop treating it like a personality flaw. You start seeing it as history in the nervous system. If you grew up in the 80s and you still feel unusually responsible for keeping relationships calm, it makes sense. If you learn to read moods faster than words, it makes sense. If you have a hard time asking for help, it makes sense. If you feel restless in stability, as if stability is too quiet, and must be temporary, it makes sense. If you love deeply but keep part of your heart slightly packed up, like a suitcase ready for the next shift, it makes sense. You were trained in change, and training sticks. But recognizing the training is not the same as being trapped by it. The point isn't to relive your childhood. The point is to understand why certain patterns show up now, why closeness can feel complicated, why conflict can feel threatening, why you might prefer control over vulnerability. Because those preferences didn't come from nowhere. They came from a child doing their best in an adult-sized transition. If you want to, share one pattern you recognize in the comments, something small. Were you the good kid who didn't add weight? The room reader who kept everyone calm? The translator between adults? The kid who always had a bag packed? The kid who learned 2 sets of rules and never fully relaxed? You don't have to share anything heavy, just a detail. Sometimes naming a detail is enough to make someone else feel less alone. And if you want more videos about the quiet psychology behind American decades, how family structure, culture, and environment shape identity and the nervous system, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching.